You wanted a deep dive on social media's impact on mental health, and you've given us some fascinating excerpts from social media and mental health, a comprehensive analysis to work with.
It's a timely topic for sure.
It is, there's so much to unpack here.
Yeah.
Our mission here isn't to just list the pros and cons,
Yeah.
but to really understand the why behind them, you know?
And why?
It's about helping you make more informed choices about your own social media use.
Informed choices are key, especially with
Uh,
all the conflicting information out there.
For sure. And speaking of conflicting information, this source dives into both the positive and negative aspects of social media's impact on mental health.
Absolutely. It acknowledges that social media isn't inherently good or bad, but rather a tool that can be used in different ways.
A tool that's become pretty indispensable for most of us.
Precisely.
Hi.
So let's start by exploring the ways social media can actually benefit mental health.
Okay, so good news first, right?
Good news first.
The source mentions that you were looking for support groups for managing anxiety, and it highlights how social media can be a lifeline for that. Connecting with others facing similar challenges can be incredibly powerful.
It's fascinating how these platforms can foster a sense of community and belonging, especially for those who might feel isolated or marginalized in their offline lives.
Right. It's like finding your tribe online.
Exactly.
And beyond emotional support, the source also talks about the role of social media in raising awareness and education around mental health.
Absolutely. We're seeing influencers, therapists, and advocacy groups using these platforms to break down stigma and share valuable resources.
It's almost like mental health is finally having its moment in the spotlight.
Yeah.
And social media definitely played a part in that.
It's also been an incredible platform for creative expression.
Yeah.
Think about the way TikTok has empowered people, particularly those from marginalized communities, to share their stories and connect with others like them.
That's such a good point. It's not just about consuming content.
Right.
It's about having a voice and finding an outlet for self-expression.
And that can be incredibly empowering. Yeah.
So we've got emotional support, awareness, creativity, community. That's a pretty solid list of positives.
It is, but I'm guessing that's only half the story.
Right. The source is equally clear about the potential downsides of social media.
Yeah.
And one of the biggest concerns is the link between excessive use and increased anxiety and depression.
What are your thoughts on how social media impacts our tendency to compare ourselves to others? Because it seems like that's a huge part of the problem.
It's a natural human tendency to compare ourselves to others, but social media often amplifies that tendency by presenting this curated, idealized version of reality. It's like everyone's posting their highlight reel and we're left feeling like we're not measuring up.
Exactly. And that constant comparison can really fuel feelings of inadequacy and insecurity, which can then contribute to anxiety and depression.
And then we have cyberbullying, which can be absolutely brutal.
Yeah.
The source mentions the emotional distress it causes is very real.
We can't underestimate the impact of online harassment. It can have a devastating effect on mental well-being.
Absolutely. And then there's the whole addiction aspect.
Right.
I think we've all caught ourselves mindlessly scrolling for way longer than we intended.
It's incredibly common, and it speaks to how these platforms are designed, the constant notifications, the endless feeds. It all feeds into a cycle of compulsive behavior.
It's fascinating and a bit concerning how effectively these platforms tap into our brain's reward system. Makes you wonder about the long-term implications, doesn't it?
It certainly does. The source also mentions the rise of body image issues, particularly with the prevalence of filtered and edited photos.
It creates these unrealistic beauty standards that can be incredibly damaging, especially for younger users.
It's a real concern, and even if we ignore all of that,
Yep.
there's still the issue of sleep disruption from excessive screen time.
Right, all that blue light messing with our melatonin production.
Exactly.
So basically, social media can impact our sleep, our self-esteem, our mental health. It's a lot to consider.
It is, but here's the key takeaway. Social media is a tool. It can be used for good or ill depending on how you use it. So how do we use it in a way that's actually beneficial for our mental health? Because clearly just doom scrolling all day isn't the answer.
Well, that's where understanding the psychology behind these effects can really empower us, and that's what we'll delve into next.
Let's do it.
Okay.
All right, so let's dive into the psychology behind social media's effects. The source breaks down some key concepts that can help us understand why we feel the way we do when we're scrolling and tapping and liking. And one of the first concepts it unpacks is this idea of fear of missing out, or FOMO.
Oh, FOMO, everyone's favorite anxiety-inducing acronym. It's like this constant feeling that everyone else is having more fun or being more productive. We're just generally living a better life than you.
Exactly. And social media fuels that feeling by constantly bombarding us with images and stories of what everyone else is doing.
It's like a never-ending highlight reel, carefully curated to make us feel inadequate.
Precisely, the source actually compares it to a digital slot machine, where every notification, every post, every story is a potential reward, and that unpredictability keeps us coming back for more.
So it's not just that we're choosing to spend hours on social media. It's that the platforms themselves are designed to keep us hooked.
And that's where the concept of dopamine-driven engagement comes in.
Okay, remind me about dopamine again. It's like the brain's happy chemical, right?
It's a neurotransmitter that plays a key role in motivation and reward, and you know what triggers dopamine releases. Getting likes and comments and notifications on social media.
So every time we get that little ping, our brains are basically getting a hit of happiness.
And that makes us want to keep engaging, keep scrolling, keep checking, even if it's not actually fulfilling us in any meaningful way.
The source dives deep into the neuroscience here. It explains how those likes and notifications actually mimic the reward pathways activated by addictive substances.
Which explains why it can be so hard to break away from that scroll even when we know it's not serving us.
Right. It's like our brains are wired to crave that dopamine hit. So we've got FOMO, we've got dopamine. What's the third piece of the psychology puzzle?
Social comparison theory, which basically says that we naturally compare ourselves to others as a way to evaluate our own abilities and opinions.
Which is fine in theory, but social media takes that natural tendency and kind of twists it into something unhealthy.
Absolutely, because the comparisons we're making online are often distorted and unrealistic. We're comparing ourselves to these carefully curated versions of people's lives, not their everyday reality.
But instead of comparing ourselves to our actual friends and neighbors, we're comparing ourselves to like Instagram influencers and perfectly filtered selfies.
And that's a recipe for feeling inadequate and insecure because no matter how great our own lives are, there's always going to be someone online who seems to be doing it better.
Just like the saying goes, comparison is the thief of joy. And social media is a master thief.
Well put. So we've got these three powerful psychological forces at play: FOMO, dopamine-driven engagement, and social comparison. And they all contribute to the way social media can impact our mental well-being.
Okay, so now that we understand the problem a little better, what are some solutions? The source offers some practical strategies for developing healthier social media habits.
It does, and they all revolve around being more intentional and mindful about our use.
Intentional and mindful.
Mm,
I like that. It's
yeah.
not about ditching social media entirely. It's about using it in a way that actually serves us.
Exactly, and the first step is setting boundaries.
So boundaries are key. The source specifically mentions setting limits on our social media use, which I think is something we can all relate to. It's so easy to get sucked into that scroll, and suddenly hours have gone by.
It's the nature of the beast, really. But the good news is there are tools and strategies to help us regain control. The source suggests using built-in phone features or even dedicated apps to track and limit our time on social media.
So it's about being proactive and setting those limits in advance, like deciding, okay, I'm only going to spend 30 minutes on Instagram today, and then sticking to it.
Exactly.
Uh,
It can also be helpful to schedule specific times for social media use instead of just randomly checking throughout the day.
that makes sense. It's like instead of letting social media dictate your day, you're taking control of your time.
Precisely. It's about being more intentional with your usage.
Okay, so we've got boundaries and time limits. What's next on the list of strategies?
The source talks about the importance of curating your feed, being selective about who you follow and what content you consume.
This is where it gets interesting, right? It's like spring cleaning for your social media, getting rid of all the clutter and making space for things that actually nourish your mind and spirit.
It's a powerful metaphor. Unfollowing accounts that trigger negative emotions, whether it's comparison, envy, or just a general sense of feeling bad about yourself, can make a huge difference.
Out with the negativity, in with the good vibes, right?
Exactly. Seek out accounts that inspire you, make you laugh, or promote well-being. Fill your feed with content that uplifts and empowers you.
Okay, so we're setting limits, we're curating our feeds. What else can we do to make our relationship with social media healthier?
The source suggests something called a digital detox.
Oh, a digital detox. What does that entail exactly?
It's essentially taking an intentional break from social media, whether it's for a few days a week or even a month. Stepping away from those platforms can be incredibly refreshing.
I can imagine it being a little scary at first. Like, what if I miss something important?
You might be surprised how little you actually miss, and the benefits to your mental health can be huge. It allows you to reconnect with yourself, and break free from that constant cycle of checking and scrolling.
It's like giving your brain a vacation from all the digital noise.
Precisely. And when you do return to social media, you might find yourself engaging with it in a more mindful way.
Okay, so we've got setting limits, curating our feed, digital detoxes, anything else we can add to our social media wellness toolkit.
The source emphasizes the importance of prioritizing real-life connections.
Back to basics, face-to-face interaction with actual human beings.
Social media can be a great way to stay connected, but it should never replace the richness and depth of in-person relationships.
It's a good reminder. Put down the phone, go outside, and have a real conversation with someone radical. I know.
It might seem that way in today's world, but it's crucial for our well-being. And finally, the source talks about mindful posting and consumption.
Okay, break that down for me. What does that mean exactly?
It means being aware of the content you share and consume, asking yourself, how does this make me feel? Is it inspiring? Is it informative? Or is it triggering negative emotions?
So basically, before you hit post or spend hours scrolling, just take a moment to check in with yourself.
Exactly. It's all about awareness and intention.
This has been incredibly insightful. It sounds like we have a lot of control over how social media impacts our mental health.
We do. It's not about demonizing social media, but about understanding its power and using it in a way that supports our well-being.
The source we've been exploring mentions that social media can often amplify feelings of inadequacy. So here's something to think about. How can you use social media to build yourself, instead of tearing yourself down? That's something to ponder as you navigate the digital world. And as always, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, stay curious.